Hello, dear friends. I'm so happy to see you again on my channel. As always, today I'll continue bringing you the latest moments, sweet, touching, and full of emotions, in the romantic love story of the talented, handsome CEO James and the gentle yet strong-willed girl, Diep. In the previous episode, I'm sure you still remember vividly how James and Diep held a magnificent, radiant wedding. The ceremony took place in a warm, romantic atmosphere like a fairy tale. Amid gentle music, vibrant blossoms, and the presence of friends and family, the two officially joined hands and stepped into married life. Not only that, they also opened their hearts to welcome little Nie, an innocent, pure girl, as their adopted daughter. From that moment, a small yet complete family was truly formed. After the wedding, they moved into their new home, a place filled with sunlight, greenery, and the sound of birds in the morning. There, each day is a simple but heartwarming story. In the morning, Diep prepares breakfast, James helps little Nie get ready for school, and the three of them gather around the table, their bright smiles shining like the morning sun. In the afternoon, James and Diep water the plants and tend to the small vegetable garden, while Nie happily plays with the kitten in the yard. On weekends, they go on picnics, visit the countryside market, or simply sit together on the porch, watching the sunset. But dear friends, family life is not always filled with rosy colors. Ahead of James and Diep will surely be many challenges and worries they must face: James's busy work, Diep's health and happiness, and the responsibility of raising little Nie as she grows up. How will they overcome these storms together? Will love and sharing be enough to keep the flame of happiness always burning bright? Let's step into today's video to witness many touching, genuine, and heartwarming moments in this new journey of their little family. And as always, don't forget to leave your blessings and thoughts in the comments below to support James, Diep, and little Nie. Remember to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes, because I promise there are still countless surprises and touching details waiting ahead. After the grand wedding filled with laughter, blessings, and admiring glances from everyone, James and Diep officially began a new life together in a small house nestled beside a lush pomelo garden. The house was not spacious, nor as luxurious as the dazzling villas in the city, but it carried the warmth and peace they had always dreamed of. Every day, the gentle scent of pomelo blossoms drifted through the yard with the wind, while clusters of heavy fruit hung like promises of an abundant future waiting ahead. Each morning, golden sunlight streamed softly through the windows, waking the little home. Birds sang cheerfully in the garden, like a melody to greet the day. In the cozy kitchen, Diep gently prepared breakfast, her skillful hands quickly chopping vegetables, frying eggs, as the fragrance spread throughout the house. James sat nearby, helping her set the table while quietly watching his wife, his eyes brimming with love. Little Nie came skipping out of her room, her neatly tied hair bouncing with every step. She sat at the table, her bright eyes sparkling as she eagerly shared stories about her friends and little happenings at school. The cheerful laughter and lively chatter mixed with the aroma of breakfast, lighting up the whole house with morning joy. After the meal, James wiped his daughter's mouth, while Diep tenderly brushed aside the strands of hair falling over her forehead. Their eyes met, no words were needed. A single smile was enough to say it all. This was the simple happiness they had once longed for. When breakfast was over, little Nie ran out into the yard. Her tiny footsteps left marks on the dew-kissed tiles. She circled around the pomelo trees, waving her little hands high and calling out, "Daddy! Mommy! Look at me!" Her pure, joyful voice echoed through the green garden, washing away every sorrow. James and Diep stood hand in hand at the porch, their eyes following their daughter. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Amid the peaceful setting, there was only love, only laughter, and the sweet sound of Daddy, Mommy lingering in the air, wrapping warmly around their hearts. At night, when the bright moon lit up the garden, the three of them sat together on the porch. James told fairy tales to Nee in his gentle voice, while Diep leaned on his shoulder with a peaceful smile on her lips. Slowly, Nee drifted to sleep in her mother's arms, her breathing steady and calm. James carefully carried her into her room, then returned to clasp Diep's hand. Together, they gazed silently at the starry sky, knowing deep within that after all the storms, they had finally found their true home. One fresh morning, the sky stretched endlessly blue with a few fluffy white clouds drifting lazily, while golden sunlight poured down over the pomelo garden heavy with fruit. A soft breeze carried the gentle fragrance of blossoms, brushing through the rustling leaves and filling the air with an almost magical peace. Inside the small room, Diep stood quietly by the window, her hands resting lightly on her belly. A strange yet warm feeling spread from within, making her heart tremble. A shy but radiant smile bloomed on her lips, her cheeks flushed pink, and in her sparkling eyes, joy overflowed, impossible to hide. At that very moment, James opened the door and stepped inside. He froze for a second, stunned by the sight of his wife. Diep stood still, dreamy-eyed, one hand placed on her stomach as if cradling something priceless. In that brief instant, James felt his heartbeat slow, his legs stiffen. Then, as he realized the meaning of her gesture, emotion surged through him like waves. His eyes widened, astonishment mingling with overwhelming joy. He rushed forward, wrapping his arms tightly around his wife, holding her as if afraid this happiness might vanish. His voice trembled, thick with emotion. "Is it true, my love? Are we going to have a baby?" Diep gave a gentle nod, tears streaming down her cheeks, tears of pure happiness. Nestled in her husband's embrace, she let her heart race freely. James held her even tighter, whispering a promise into her ear, his voice steady and full of warmth. Thank you for giving me the greatest gift. I promise, from now until the end of my life, I will cherish and protect you and our child with everything I have." In that sacred moment, the world seemed to fall silent, leaving only the sound of two hearts beating together. A sweet dream, a bright vision of the future came alive before their eyes, the image of a tiny angel, delicate little hands, a pure cry, and the first wobbly steps echoing through their small home. It was as though a picture of their future was being painted before them. Outside in the yard, little Nee still played joyfully, her laughter ringing throughout the pomelo garden. She had no idea she was about to become an older sister, about to gain a companion to play with and share love. Her cheerful voice, "Daddy," "Mommy," echoed through the air, blending perfectly with the immense happiness surging in her parents' hearts. From that moment on, James and Diep knew their lives had turned to a brand new chapter, a sacred journey, full of challenges yet overflowing with love and hope. Deep down, both believed this truth: as long as they kept holding hands, as long as they kept building together, their home would forever be filled with laughter and the radiant light of happiness. The joy had barely settled when the days of hardship came crashing in. Not long after learning she was pregnant, Diep began to suffer from severe morning sickness. Her body grew weaker than ever. Meals that once delighted her now made her nauseous at just a glance. Many nights, she curled up in bed, exhausted from endless waves of vomiting, her complexion turning pale, her eyes losing their usual sparkle. Seeing his wife like this tore James apart inside. During the day, he juggled work while rushing her to checkups, asking the doctors about every little detail. At night, when the world was asleep, he stayed awake, preparing warm cups of water, wiping her sweat, gently rubbing her back through each wave of sickness. His eyes were heavy with fatigue, yet within them glowed an unshakable determination. No matter how hard it got, he would never leave her side. Little Nee, too young to fully understand, only saw her mother always weary. She toddled about, bringing towels, bringing water, sometimes sitting by the bed to hold her mother's hand and whisper, "Mom, don't be sick anymore. I love you." Those innocent words brought tears to Diep's eyes, tears of both pain and strength. She knew she could not allow herself to collapse. Yet her fragile body could not withstand the strain. One afternoon, as the sun faded over the pomelo garden, Diep tried to step outside to water the plants, hoping for fresh air. But after only a few steps, darkness clouded her vision. Her strength failed, her legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the tiled ground. The sound made James rush outside. What he saw froze his blood. Diep lay unconscious in the garden, her face as pale as paper. He darted forward, clutching her tremblingly in his arms, barely able to steady himself. His heart clenched, pounding violently in his chest. "Diep. My love, wake up, please," James cried out, his voice breaking. Without wasting a second, he lifted her and carried her to the car. Nee screamed in terror, crying "Mommy," as she stumbled after them. James laid Diep in the seat, started the engine, and sped toward the hospital, the blaring siren of his car cutting through the evening air. That night, under the harsh white glow of hospital lights, James sat outside the emergency room, his hands clenched tight, cold sweat dripping down. Every sound around him blurred into nothing, only the pounding of his heart remained, mixed with an unbearable fear. If he lost Diep, he would lose everything. When Diep collapsed in the garden and was rushed to the hospital, James felt like a man who had lost his soul. He paced frantically up and down the hallway, then sank into a chair outside the emergency room, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Never in his life had a single moment felt so unbearably long. The mere thought of losing Diep suffocated him, and even more, within her lay a fragile new life, the very embodiment of their love. James would not allow himself to break down, yet the fear surged uncontrollably inside him. After long, agonizing hours, Diep finally regained consciousness. The doctor instructed that she must be placed under special care and monitored constantly. James did not leave her side for even a second. He sat by her bed, gripping her hand as though letting go for just one moment might mean losing her forever. Each time she stirred, his eyes lit up, his heart thumping with relief. He fed her spoonfuls of porridge, held cups of water carefully to her lips, and gently wiped the sweat from her brow. The man who had once been busy and stern now seemed transformed into a devoted husband, living solely for the well-being of his wife and child. But James knew he couldn't stay at the hospital wholeheartedly if he left Nee alone. After many sleepless nights of agonizing thought, he decided to send his daughter to stay with his mother. The choice cut deeply into his heart, for Nee had long been the light and laughter of their home. At her grandmother's house, Nee was cared for with tenderness. Meals were always warm, and her grandmother spoke gently with her, asking about school and sometimes sharing old stories. At night, Nee lay in her grandmother's arms, lulled by the familiar melody of old lullabies. Yet in her innocent eyes lingered a shadow of sadness. When the house fell quiet, the ticking of the clock seemed louder. Nee stared at the ceiling and whispered softly into the darkness. "Daddy, Mommy, do you miss me? Mommy, are you still very tired?" Her grandmother stroked her back soothingly, coaxing her to sleep. But those questions lingered, circling inside the child's tender heart. Sometimes her bright gaze grew heavy, losing the carefree innocence of other children. Deep within her, a quiet fear began to grow. When the baby is born, will Mommy still love me as much as before? Could it be I'll be forgotten? Meanwhile, at the hospital, James had lost all sense of time. He kept vigil day and night, his face gaunt, dark circles carved beneath his eyes. No matter how exhausted he was, he remained endlessly patient, caring for Diep in every small detail. And in the quiet moments when she drifted into sleep, James would secretly take out his phone and look at pictures of me, from the ones where she laughed brightly in the pomelo garden, to the family portrait on their wedding day. Each time, his heart ached with both love and guilt. His worries were torn in two halves, one for Diep and the fragile child in her womb, the other for me, the innocent little girl learning how to be a big sister, yet fearing she might lose her parents' love. Late at night, as the wind whispered through the hospital windows, James sat holding Diep's hand, murmuring softly to himself. No matter how hard things get, no one in this family will ever be left behind. Nee will always be our daughter, loved as she was from the very beginning, and this baby too. We'll all live together under one roof, in peace and love. James began to notice the change in his daughter's eyes. Once a lively little girl who was always chattering and laughing, Nee had grown quieter. She often sat absent-mindedly on the doorstep, her tiny hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the gate as though waiting for someone to appear. Each time the phone rang inside the house, she would dash toward it, her heart racing with hope that it was her father calling. But when she realized it was only one of her grandmother's calls for work, Nee lowered her head, her small shoulders trembling in disappointment. The sadness etched on that tender face pierced James's heart. It felt as though someone was squeezing his chest. He worried endlessly for Diep, his wife, lying weak in her hospital bed, needing constant care, yet he also ached for his daughter. Nee was not old enough to understand everything, but she was sensitive enough to feel left behind. To James, both were as flesh and blood, equally precious. But how could he balance it? How could he ensure that both his wife and daughter felt wholly loved? That question haunted him day and night. One evening, after making sure Diep was sleeping peacefully, James quietly stepped out onto the hospital veranda. The cool night air swept in, carrying the earthy scent of grass and trees dampened by the afternoon rain. The sky stretched deep and vast, scattered with thousands of stars twinkling like tiny lanterns, lighting up the empty courtyard. James lowered himself onto an old wooden bench, leaning back slightly, his gaze lost in the endless expanse. His heart churned with tangled thoughts, restless as crashing waves. Memories replayed so vividly that his chest tightened. Nee's pure smile the first time she called, "Daddy." Her trusting eyes when she clung to his hand. The cold sweat dripping down Diep's forehead when she fainted in the garden, terrifying him with the thought of losing her. And that indescribable joy when he pressed his ear to her belly and heard the heartbeat of their unborn child, the most fragile, yet strongest sound he had ever known. All those images overlapped, pressing down on him until a sob almost escaped his throat. In the silence, he clenched his fists and whispered inwardly, "What should I do? It's not just about protecting Diep and the baby. I have to make sure Nee knows she will forever be our daughter. She will never be abandoned. On the contrary, our love will only grow. A family is only complete when every member is wrapped in love." James took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, easing the storm within him. He closed his eyes, then slowly opened them again. The unease in his gaze had softened, replaced with a steadfast resolve. Though his face was gaunt and weary from sleepless nights, there was a new strength radiating from him. He knew, this challenge wasn't just Diep's burden, nor his alone. It was a journey their whole family must face together. And he, as a husband and a father, had to be the steady shoulder, the bridge, the protective embrace that kept them united. In the quiet of the night, the wind stirred the leaves outside the veranda, and the starlight reflected in James's eyes gleamed with determination. No matter how many storms lay ahead, he believed with all his heart that with love, patience, and compassion, their little family would endure. And one day, Diep, Nee, and the baby yet to be born would sit under the same sky with him, smiling with a happiness untouched by pain. In the hospital room bathed in harsh white light, the silence was so deep one could hear each tick of the clock. James sat close by the bed, his large hand gripping Diep's thin, fragile one. Exhaustion carved into his face after countless sleepless nights, yet in his eyes burned an unwavering resolve. He knew that as long as they held on to each other, they would never fall. Across the bed, little Nee shrank back slightly, her round eyes glistening with hesitation. She gazed at her mother for a long while, as though wrestling with the fears inside her. Then, after a moment's pause, Nee slowly reached out, her tiny hand trembling as it touched her mother's. The gesture was timid, uncertain, but it carried all the yearning for love, an unspoken plea to know she still held a precious place in her mother's heart. Nee's eyes shimmered with sadness, like raindrops clinging to her lashes. Yet deep within them flickered a faint light, the light of hope. Hope that love would never be divided, hope that with her mother and father beside her, she would forever remain the cherished daughter, embraced and protected. James tightened his grip on Diep's hand, then gently placed his other hand on Nee's small shoulder. 3 hands, 3 heartbeats, woven together as one. The room, once cold with sickness, seemed to glow with a sudden warmth born of an invisible but powerful bond. Then, the narrator's voice rose softly, yet with weight. True family happiness is not only built on love, but also on understanding and sharing. Though the road ahead is filled with trials, it is their unity that will guide them through every storm. In the final frame, James's steady gaze, Diep's weak yet tender hand, and Nee's trembling but hopeful fingers intertwined, together forming a simple yet sacred picture, the image of a small family, unyielding before life's tempests. In the hospital room, 3 hands intertwined, James, Diep, and little Nee, like an invisible thread binding the family together. Outside, life was still full of storms, still filled with challenges waiting ahead, yet in that moment the room glowed with love and trust. In the silence of the hospital, they needed no words, just a glance, just a squeeze of the hand was enough to understand. Happiness is sometimes that simple. And yet, the story does not end here. Ahead lies countless trials yet to come. Will James and Diep find the strength and courage to overcome the hardest chapter of their lives, to protect the fragile home they have just begun to build? Will little Nee, with her tender soul and innocent fears, open her heart to fully embrace the boundless love of her parents, and learn how to become a gentle, caring sister? And will the child in Diep's womb come into the world healthy and strong, bringing with them new cries, laughter, and a happiness more complete than ever? The answers remain ahead, in each passing day that carries with it surprises, emotions, tears, and smiles. Love, understanding, and faith will be the light guiding them through hardship, helping them write a new chapter together, one filled with meaning. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow, to witness the unfolding of this story, the moments that may bring tears to your eyes, yet also deepen your belief in the power of family, of love, and of a bond that nothing can break.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện của CEO James và Lý Tử Diệp. Như mọi người đã biết, James và Diệp hiện tại đang có cuộc sống bên nhau khá là êm đềm và hạnh phúc. Họ đang xây dựng một tổ ấm riêng cho riêng mình, và James thì cũng đã hoàn thành các thủ tục để nhận nuôi bé Nhi rồi. Vậy hiện tại bé Nhi vẫn đang ở cạnh bên James và Diệp với tư cách là con nuôi, và cả hai đã kết hôn. James và Diệp thì đã kết hôn và về chung sống cùng với nhau. Tuy nhiên thì có một tin cũng khá là vui đối với họ, đó là khi Diệp có con chung của hai người. Vậy thì liệu bé Nhi khi mà James và Diệp có con chung thì có bị mất đi tình cảm yêu thương hay không, và liệu mọi chuyện tiếp theo sẽ diễn biến như thế nào, và tình cảm của James và Diệp dành cho bé Nhi thì có gì thay đổi hay không? Hãy cùng đón xem cùng mình ở tập tiếp theo vào ngày mai nhé mọi người.